Resilience isn't about avoiding stress, it's about meeting it with strength. This adaptogenic trio is called our chill mix for a reason. Our award-winning calm and collected formula is a favourite among people with busy, anxious brains. I have combined lion's mane, ashwagandha and holy basil with sea greens to ease your racing mind and calm a jittery body. Consistency is key when it comes to adaptogens, so make calm and collected part of your evening ritual for calm, resilience and rest.
Why do some people seem able to change their lives while other people stay stuck? You may think this is about discipline or motivation or confidence, but in this episode I'm going to show you what actually makes the difference, and it's not any of those things. I'm also going to talk about how you can shift from feeling stuck to being one of those people that you are probably comparing yourself negatively to at the moment. Hello, my name's Alex and I'm a resilience coach. And I'm here to help you find freedom from whatever is keeping you stuck right now so that you can actually thrive at life. I work with the mind and the nervous system to make changing your life simple and so fucking satisfying. This is season 4 of Notes on Vulnerability, in which you will find some fantastic interviews with really interesting people, as well as some shorter episodes like this one, where I am sharing insights and ideas that I feel would be quite useful for people right now. Because something that I've realized as a resilience coach is that we make life a lot harder than it really needs to be. And the idea that change is out of reach for you because you are not disciplined enough or not motivated enough is a huge obstacle. So let's look at that assumption that discipline and motivation are what we really need to have in order to change our lives. This assumption is what tends to lead us to look at people who have kind of built businesses, left bad relationships, escaped a shitty childhood, taken risks, or really gone after what they want in life, and think to ourselves, well, what do they have that I don't? As someone who used to have a real victim mindset, that question is painfully familiar to me. I asked myself that for a very long time. I know how it feels to have that sitting in your mind all of the time and making things feel very out of reach for you. I also understand why someone responding to that kind of question with, well, just make a gratitude list or try harder or change your mindset isn't really very helpful. Because yes, it's true that perspective really matters, and so does gratitude, but there are some very real and bigger reasons why change can feel easier for some people than others. And the word that I'd use to describe most of those reasons is capacity. Some people simply have more capacity for change, more capacity to tolerate uncertainty or handle setbacks, to keep going when something feels uncomfortable, the capacity to really believe that things can work out even when there may not be any signs that they will. But to be really clear about this, capacity is not something that you are born with. It's usually the result of various different factors, a few of which I'm going to cover in this episode. So the good news is that you are not stuck with whatever capacity you currently have. You already have all of the components inside of you to build capacity that is at least equal to what anyone else has. But if we're going to build it, we first need to understand where it actually comes from. Before that, the first thing I want to acknowledge is the simple fact that some people are born into a situation that has the potential to make their progress through life a lot easier. I think what this mostly comes down to is financial security and emotional stability. These are things that we just do not talk about enough. Partly, I think, because, it's not polite to talk about money, and a lot of us have a reluctance to discuss our childhoods, our feelings, or run the risk of blaming the people who raised us. But we really need to talk about these things, because half the battle with becoming someone who can change your life is not seeing yourself as someone who is incapable of doing that. Acknowledging these kind of early life differences in wealth or emotional stability isn't going to hold you back from creating more of either, even though I know there is a perception that you don't want to focus on these things. But acknowledging this stuff will show you where some of what's happened in your life is really not down to you, it was down to your situation. And this can be really liberating information if you use it in the right way. Let me explain. Being born into kind of financial stability or wealth does 2 big things for us. One, it means that someone who grew up with this often has an abundance mindset around money, around wealth, around earning. They assume that money will always be available to them because it always has been. that it will be an enjoyable process to spend it rather than an anxiety-inducing one, and that earning it will come easily. This kind of perspective is a huge advantage because it means that your mind is already primed for earning and for receiving. It's amazing how many ways we can block receiving money in our lives if we don't have this kind of mindset. A positive money mindset is one that attracts wealth, is open to receiving wealth, is open to financial growth, and kind of expects financial freedom. That kind of mindset will directly influence how you behave with money because all of those beliefs are being fed into your confirmation bias, into the reticular activating system. So your brain will go through the world looking out for anything that confirms those beliefs. And as a result, you will expect and receive more financial abundance because that's what your brain is looking for. Those are the parameters for your life. If you weren't born into financial stability, you may have a scarcity mindset, which is obviously the opposite of abundance, which means you may believe that resources like money are finite, that there isn't enough to go around, there definitely isn't enough for you to have what you need or what you want. And you may have a constant fear of not having enough. And so because we all have the same confirmation bias mechanism in our heads, these are the beliefs that will go into your confirmation bias. And so that is the kind of evidence that your mind will be looking for as you go through the world. It means that you will often bypass opportunities for abundance simply because abundance does not align with those core beliefs. Your underlying core beliefs are of scarcity. As a result, you will see in the world and receive more scarcity. There are obviously limits to this, but essentially whatever mindset you have, you will get more of. And obviously you can change your mindset at any time through a process like coaching. But if you were raised with an abundance mindset, you don't have to do that. You don't have to dedicate time and energy and resources to changing what's up here. And that's why it's such a huge advantage to have learned this way of thinking early on. I think the other probably more obvious thing about being born into financial security is that wealth just makes life easier in many ways. I'm not saying that financial security and wealth are a guarantee of anything, but they do make life easier. You know, for example, all of us want to have a roof over our heads, but buying a home, if you have financial security, parents, you can give you a deposit or you inherit a deposit, is way easier than having to earn that deposit yourself. Obviously, there are loads of people who get on the property ladder without inherited wealth, but you know, the amount of effort and kind of focus that's required to get to that same place is different. And I don't think we acknowledge that enough. And then, you know, being born into financial stability, security, wealth, it just contributes to so many other things, whether that is education or your health, or even what you feel like you can reach for in life, or even your identity sometimes. So there is an ease that comes from being financially well resourced from the very start that makes it easier to change your life in so many ways, mentally, tangibly in the physical world. Acknowledging this will show you where you are unfairly comparing yourself to people who had this level of ease that maybe you did not. The point of doing that is not, you know, to tap into poor me kind of mentality. It's to stop you being so hard on yourself and to highlight where you actually could put your resources to make changes that would recalibrate this part of your life for you. Emotional stability is the second really important factor here because it is an enormous advantage to have grown up in a physically and emotionally safe home around adults who made you feel valuable, who made you feel seen, and who didn't prioritize their needs over yours. When we're young, there are two core needs that all of us are focused on: authenticity and attachment. If you don't have emotional stability growing up, then secure attachment is unlikely to be there. If it's not, that's the point at which we start to learn things like people pleasing, shaming ourselves, shrinking ourselves, hypervigilance. These are all adaptations that children often have to make to preserve an insecure attachment to a caregiver who, among other things, hasn't provided emotional stability. All of those things undermine authenticity, so they undermine the ability to understand who you are and be yourself. And this is one of the main reasons why so many of us get to adulthood really not having a clue about who we actually are. So authenticity really suffers without emotional stability, meaning that you can drift through your life without a purpose if you don't have authenticity or a sense of who you are. And that's often what takes us to a place of stuckness. But a lack of emotional stability can also be a catalyst for a lot of really difficult things in life. For example, living with a permanent sense of anxiety, having no tolerance for stress, not really having much self-esteem, being unable to communicate your feelings, not being able to trust people, or continuing to pick kind of friends and relationships that align with that insecure attachment. And this is something that will never self-correct. That early template that you receive needs to be intentionally scrubbed, or you will just keep doing the same thing over and over again. So think about what was present in your childhood and what was missing. What money stories did your upbringing give you? Because these will determine how you approach income and earning as an adult. Was there never really enough when you were growing up? Did your parents talk about wealth as if it belonged to the other half? Or did they say things like money doesn't grow on trees? Or were you left with a feeling that success can only come through struggle? Most of our parents did their best at the time with what they had, so this really isn't about blame. But if we don't look honestly at where this stuff has come from, we can't do anything to move past it because we're not starting from a truthful place. When it comes to spotting a lack of emotional stability, there are some really obvious signs that this may have been missing for you as a child. For example, as an adult, you're not able to name your emotions, all of your emotions. Maybe you don't understand what you're really feeling and you can't communicate your feelings in an effective way. Instead, you may act impulsively, you may find yourself lashing out, suppressing, numbing, that kind of thing. Another really clear sign is that failure feels unacceptable to you, because as a child, these were not seen as a part of life for which you maybe received constructive, non-critical feedback and then moved on from, but instead were shamed for and judged for. Another clear sign is that you don't know how to set boundaries because you were never allowed to set boundaries as a kid without guilt. If you find yourself as an adult hiding parts of yourself or really avoiding vulnerability, that can often be because as a child you had to hide parts of yourself to keep the peace. Another really big sign is if you find it hard to trust. As a result, you might be hyper independent, you might be a people pleaser because you just don't expect relationships to be trusting and stable and you feel like you have to manage them. Another big reason this matters is because emotional stability has a big influence on the capacity that I mentioned at the start of this. The capacity to trust yourself, the capacity to recover from setbacks in life, the capacity to tolerate discomfort without completely falling apart, and the capacity to keep moving when life doesn't go perfectly. It's also about the capacity to make big changes happen. So if emotional stability is one way that we create capacity, then the nervous system is actually where that capacity lives. For me, this was the big reveal about why some people seem to find it so much easier to change their lives while others stay stuck and just struggle to do anything. I've gone into detail about the nervous system in a lot of these podcast episodes because it's so critical to this stuff and so often ignored. What's really important here is capacity and response. Your nervous system determines how much capacity you have for life. And what that really means is the space that you have for the stuff that is outside your comfort zone before your nervous system kicks in, shuts you down through something like self-sabotage or disconnection. It also has a really big role to play in how you respond to challenges, failures, hurts, losses, and how able you are to tolerate making change. So capacity is big. If you have been living with a lot of dysregulation, there won't be much capacity for anything outside of your comfort zone. So change is going to feel almost too hard, and you are going to feel like you are already on a hair trigger most of the time. So any challenge that you face, any attempt at change is likely going to produce a big reaction in you, and anything going wrong will knock you down and take 7 business days to recover from. These two things, capacity and response, are absolutely crucial for how we experience life and whether we get stuck or whether we change and grow. It's the difference between someone who can be vulnerable with another person and someone who finds that so terrifying that they just walk away or shut down, even if that's what they really want. It's the difference between someone who looks for solutions when something goes wrong and someone who turns on themselves or freezes or kind of drowns in shame. When you start to exist in a more regulated nervous system, you respond and cope better with life. You will notice that the moments that used to completely destroy your day just become things that you can deal with and then move on. And it will feel easier to do, anything. Whether that is a spontaneous trip somewhere, taking a step towards a big dream, going to a new class, making new friends, public speaking. All of these elements will always have an element of uncertainty in them, which means that they will always give us a little bit of kind of excitement / anxiety. But the difference with having capacity in your nervous system is that feeling, that anxiety, it won't stop you. Something being outside your comfort zone won't mean that you can never do it. It won't overwhelm you or cause you to shut down or head down the road of catastrophizing when you're faced with something like this. You will just do it anyway. The reality, unfortunately, is that when you get one of these, you tend to get another as well. So if you didn't grow up with emotional stability, for example, you are likely to have experienced more dysregulation in your nervous system, because emotional stability is part of a regulated nervous system. You know, it's likely that your childhood meant you were often dysregulated, and maybe no one showed you how not to be, because maybe they didn't know either. Being dysregulated is something that I would compare to having like a burn on your arm. So every single thing that touches you kind of creates pain and makes you jump or react in a bigger way than if it wasn't there. It's incredibly disruptive because coping with your reactions becomes the task, rather than just coping with life with supportive reactions. It's why both nervous system regulation and emotional awareness are a key part of resilience and the resilience coaching that I do. These are things we can learn. You aren't stuck with whatever blueprint you got in childhood. It may be deeply embedded, but there is always something that you can do that will make a difference to how you experience life as a result, especially when it comes to capacity. What you experience at the moment doesn't have to be what you experience this time next year, but you do have to take action to change it. So how do you become someone who changes their life instead of someone who feels stuck? First of all, stop making yourself the problem for where you are right now. Yes, you are responsible for changing your current situation, but seeing yourself as weak, lazy, broken, or somehow at fault for where you are, that isn't helping. In fact, it's probably one of the things that's actually keeping you stuck. You cannot shame yourself into becoming the version of you that you want to be. Trust me, I have tried. So we start with the most powerful of attitudes, and that is self-compassion. It's way more powerful than performative gratitude, discipline, or motivation will ever be, especially because self-compassion is the origin point of discipline and motivation anyway. If you're someone who has a lot of shame or anxiety, this is the first essential step. If you don't take this, if you don't start becoming more self-compassionate, nothing else is going to change. The second key thing is to start developing a relationship with your nervous system, not through morning routines, breath work, etc., but actually through communicating with your nervous system and listening to it. I feel like so many people are obsessed with kind of finding the perfect morning routine, or, you know, gaining more discipline, more productivity, finding just the right hack. But if your nervous system is already overwhelmed, all you're going to do with that stuff is ask an already burnt out system to shoulder even more, and that is not going to work. So instead, just get curious. What is your nervous system doing right now? Can you identify when it is trying to send you a sign or some data or a message that you don't listen to? Survival outranks aspiration in the neural hierarchy, which means that your nervous system has the biggest role to play in the way that you respond to life. It's much bigger than your mindset. If you don't have a relationship with your nervous system, if you are often dysregulated with no tools to help you with that, then you are basically flying through life with no ability to influence how you respond, or to stop making it feel like you are constantly on fire. Basic awareness will change that, followed by starting to take small steps in the right direction, and that direction is towards the things which are outside your comfort zone. Your nervous system does not learn through kind of vision boards and motivational quotes or enforced routines. It learns through evidence, and by that I mean the small moments where you actually do the thing which is outside your comfort zone and then discover that you can survive it even though it's outside your comfort zone and your nervous system did not like the idea of doing it. And then you do it again, and then you do it again, until eventually the thing that once felt impossible feels normal because it's inside your comfort zone and your nervous system has adapted to it. I think one of the most liberating things I ever learned is that being stuck isn't something that reflects badly on you. It's just a sign that you've reached the edge of your current nervous system capacity, which translates as the edge of what feels safe, the edge of what your nervous system currently knows how to hold. And when you reach that place, if you start to notice it more as a result of listening to this podcast, you might see the self-sabotage start to kick in, or the tightness, or the shutdown. And remember, at that point when that starts happening, that capacity, that point can be expanded. You can learn to hold more than you currently do. You can learn to hold whatever you want, whether that is success, visibility, intimacy, joy, to tolerate more uncertainty and just more of life in general. And that's the point at which you will become one of those people who don't seem to find it as hard to change your life. I don't think anyone listening to this would expect me to say that it is easy to change your life, because it's not. But once you've learned how to develop more capacity, you'll have removed the extra disadvantages of having a nervous system that basically constantly applies the brakes. Things will still feel challenging, but they won't feel unsafe, which means your nervous system won't shut you down or overwhelm you or kind of create unbearable anxiety around the things that are going to lead you to growth and change. As a result, you will be able to move forward. Hopefully that has shed a little bit of light on why getting unstuck is not about motivation or discipline or trying harder, but so much more about capacity and your nervous system. This is obviously a huge part of what I do as a resilience coach. So if you would like some help expanding your capacity, you can book a free intro call via the link in the show notes. You can also come and find me on Instagram at Alex Resilience Coach and online at shore-coaching.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the episodes.